What inspired your passion for wine?
What inspired my passion for wine? Well, actually, it goes back a very long time when I was quite young. We always drank wine at home with meals. My father was a wine lover. He travelled a lot, and I was forever meeting people from all over the world and tasting wines from all over the world and hearing about his travels and sort of liked the idea of wine. The school I went to had an ag science course, and I studied ag science, and the bit that I really liked was the vineyards and learning about wine and winemaking more than the sheep and goats and things weren't quite so exciting. And I kind of put the two together and decided that's what I wanted to do when I was about 13 or 14 years old.
Oh, okay.
And from there, that's pretty well all I've ever done.
Oh, okay. And so you've had a lot of experience in Australia and overseas with winemaking.
Yes, since I finished school a long time ago, I worked at Vintage in the Parra Vale. Then I studied winemaking, and then all I've really done ever since is working in the wine business in Australia. I worked at Wolf Blass, Tyrrell's, Seville Estate in Victoria, Jane Brook Estate in West Australia. I've done 3 vintages in Bordeaux, a couple of vintages in Tuscany, Marche, Abruzzo and Puglia on the east coast of Italy, California, Languedoc in France. I worked for 14 years at Wirrawira as a winemaker, and left in 2001 and started Mystery Wine Company, and which is what I'm still doing right now, as well as I consult a bit around the place.
Oh, okay. And you consult for a few different
Yes.
wineries, is that correct?
Yeah, there's quite a few I make wine for.
You make wine for them. And you've got the Black Chookies.
Electric Bazaars as well, yes,
Oh, okay.
which is really been an amazing success. I guess the wines and the label all seem to work and people enjoy them. So,
Yeah, they do. What is your most favourite wine at the present time? And why
most
would that
favourite wine.
be?
That's a very, very difficult question. I like to quote. That question was often asked to people like myself, and I remember talking to Hugh Johnson once, who was, I guess, in his day one of the most famous wine people. He wrote the World Wine Atlas, and people would always ask him what's the best wine he's ever grown. He'd say that's a very difficult thing to answer. He said, the answer I always give is the most memorable wine I ever had was a bottle of Retsina while I was sitting on a hill watching the sunset in Greece. With a young lady under one arm and a icy cold glass of Retsina in the other hand, and that was the most memorable wine I've ever had. And I guess that kind of fits. It's the people you're with, the food you're eating, the occasion, as much as the wine itself. I like anything that's good. I like trying, whatever's interesting and good at the time. It's very difficult to say, what's
Specific,
the greatest bottle of wine I've had recently, because I try lots of good ones.
What are the emerging trends as you see them in the wine industry presently?
Well, the obvious one in the last couple of years has been the explosion of Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, which has certainly taken over to a certain extent white wine drinking in this country. I think you'll find that'll be a positive thing in general, because I think you'll find that's introducing people to wine. And I think you'll see people evolving onto other wine styles. I'm finding with my own wines that the German style Riesling that I make, the VOR GS, is really growing beautifully, particularly in Queensland. The sales are really strong. It's a lower alcohol, with a little bit of residual sugar, very crisp, tangy, fresh glass of wine, lots of flavour, fantastic food wine. And I think, we started doing this about 7 years ago, the German style Riesling. I would say 08 and 09, there'd be probably, and when I started doing it, I think there was Wellington from New Zealand, Bress from Victoria, and mine. I think we're the only 3 from Australia that I know that were making that style. I guess you'd call it a cabinet to maybe Spatelet's inspired style. I'd say there'd be 20 or more on the market now, which is good, because it shows that people are interested in that style, and I can see that growing and developing. Viogna was considered to be one of the next big things. Sales haven't been fantastic for it, but it does make very, very good wines and delicious wines, and I think that will, as long as we keep making the right quality, I think you'll find that'll start to get some traction and sell better. there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of new Italian variety, or not new to Australia, not new varieties being planted. Some of them will go well, others I think won't. I think you've got your reasons, your Semillons, I mean, even Chardonnay, funny enough, I think will rebound. The sales of Chardonnay have really gotten plummeted. But what you'll find is the Chardonnays that are left in the market are really very good and represent fabulous value. And I think you'll find people start drinking it again. In white wines, in red wines. For me, of all the newer varieties in Australia that show potential, Tempranillo would probably be my favourite. It seems to work in our climate very well, more so than a lot of the Italian varieties. The absolute quality of Tempranillo is fabulous in Australia. Things like Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Riviera, those sort of things. I still haven't seen any great wines made from it, whereas Tempranillo there have been. So I would say that is something that has great potential.
Okay, and is there a few of those coming out of McLaren?
Oh yeah, it certainly is. There's plenty of Viognier. There is certainly some Tempranillo. I make Tempranillo from the Adelaide Hills, which is in Kaipo, which is literally about 3 kilometres outside the boundary of McLaren Vale. It's on the edge of McLaren Vale, but a little bit cooler. I think the Tempranillo is suited to cooler climates. It's an early ripening variety, so suited to places like the Adelaide Hills, and makes delicious wine.
Okay. What is your current favourite food and wine combination?
Well, as I touched on before, these sort of little bit of residual sugar, German-style Rieslings with spicy food is fantastic. Thai food, traditional Chinese food with that wine is a wonderful combination. So that would probably be the most obvious one at the moment.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about the 09 vintage?
09 vintage has ended up being a very, very strong vintage. We had a heat wave in January in South Australia which damaged a lot of fruit, as in it dried up a lot of fruit, so we lost crop. But the grapes that were left, the quality's fantastic. I mean, we've made some lovely white wines, fantastic red wines. The Adelaide Hills grapes I take, Langong Creek, southeast of South Australia, Clare, wonderful quality. Really, really very, very strong vintage. McLaren Vale is a very small vintage, but what we've made I think is 7 or 8 out of 10 probably. 08, again we had a heat wave, although in 09 the heat wave was January, on the back of a very mild summer. So October, November, December was gorgeous weather. February and March was wonderful weather. We had in Adelaide about 12 days of scorching weather. McLaren Vale, we're south of the city, and we have influence from the Southern Ocean, and we only had 5 days of the scorching weather. On day 6 it was 38 in Adelaide, it was only 30 degrees in McLaren Vale, and then another 30 kilometres south of us in Victor Harbour it was 24 degrees, so you can see the impact of being that bit south and the impact of the Southern Ocean. 08 was the same. We had a beautiful summer, mild, very gentle, lovely wet winter, and then we'd gotten through probably a bit over a third of the vintage, and then another heat wave hit in March, which is unprecedented. We've never had one in March before. Normally once you get to the end of January, early February, the weather turns into being pretty well perfect. So the first third of vintage was stunning. Some of the best white wines we've made in 08 in McLaren Vale. The second third was where we started picking during that heat, were sort of classic, I guess, big, rich, voluptuous, a bit like 98, probably 2001, those big, ripe, juicy, chocolatey McLaren Vale sort of Shiraz. By the end of the first week, there was a lot of damage from the heat, and by the end of the second week, we really left grapes after that. So probably a third was stunning, a third was those sort of big, ripe, juicy, flavoursome McLaren Vale wines, which are fantastic in blends, and I think will show up very well. And the last third was very badly affected, but you won't really see that stuff. A lot of grapes were left on the vine. A lot of the stuff that was picked has really been ruined, and you won't ever see. So it's funny, such a disastrous weather event actually will probably, you still see 08 as being a really strong vintage in general in the McLaren Vale. Places like the Adelaide Hills in the southeast of South Australia, the heat was so early that it did no damage. So they've had a fantastic vintage in 08.